space. You're with Julian on the Brown Note, and I thought we'll get this out of the way, as I'm going to run out of time very quickly on this epic ending show, the last normal show of the year. A review of Strange Darling in a banner year for horror. I just reviewed Smile 2, which I thought was a fabulous film. This one is a very different, in some ways, kettle of fish. By J.T. Mollner, who's done Outlaws and Angels, a film I know next to nothing about, to be honest. And this has come forward as a very unusual serial killer film. And virtually none of it can be relayed. So the film is split into 6 chapters, and very cleverly, they're not played in order. So the film opens with Willa Fitzgerald running through a field with her ear cut off and being pursued by Gallner, who also starred in Smile 2, chasing her with an extremely terrifying look on him with a gun. And basically the chapters happen out of order and portray events that then the next chapter will completely invert. And it's impossible to really go through this. It does the Fargo thing at the start by saying that this is about one of the most notorious serial killers between this period of time in this state and so on, but which is just made up. Probably the most important sequence, the longest part of the film, showcases a one-night stand between 2 people, which is Carl Gallner, who presents himself as a genuine nice guy who's living at home with his missus, and they have separate shelves for things now, and he's not really been down this road before, and he meets Willa Fitzgerald, who exhibits some very wild tendencies as well as some massive neuroses about meeting somebody and being in an environment where a pretty strong guy is going to be able to do what he wants. And they go through all these negotiation phases, which is very relevant to the modern era about trust and where a woman's putting herself in this environment and so on, which leads them going to a hotel. And I can't really tell you much more. That's the whole film. Because the way that the chapters are laid out, it continually plays with expectation and horror tropes. I believe the director said that the foundational basis was the final girl horror trope, which is that, you know, the lead female actress is often the last survivor of the film and so on, and worked sort of backwards from that and then decided to smash everything up and do something completely different. I thought it was an amazing film. It's very, very intense. The 2 performances are amazing. Willa Fitzgerald and Carl Gallner. Often, like, people are saying that horror movies are where it's at artistically, particularly from the more art side of the horror world, like the cinematography and the sound stages and soundtracks, and even in like these 2 films, Smile and this one, the lead female acting is brilliant, but this one is not inside one person's head. You're basically inside 2 people's heads, and you don't know what their motivations are for the majority of the runtime. You could easily get well more than an hour into this film and still be weighing up which side you're on, as you're not quite sure what's going on yet. There are some problems, not many, really. I'd say this, Willa Fitzgerald and Carl Gallner are so magnificent that the side characters are not that great, and they do stand out intermittently as a bit clunky in comparison to how brilliant the main pair are. They're like awards worthy. And some of the side characters, there's Ed Begley and Barbara Hershey. They're quite good in the middle of the film, but there's a lot of kind of clunky roles. Happily, they don't make up much of the film. It's very exciting at times, particularly the openings parts of the film are incredibly exciting. The soundtrack is amazing. Again, another common denominator of the Craig de Leon. Brilliant use of sound, and not just musical sound, but also sound that can be very jarring or shocking or heighten what's going on. Rather almost patronizingly or self-importantly at the start, they say shot entirely on 35mm film, which is a little bit pretentious. It's Giovanni Ribisi's first job as a cinematographer, quite a famous actor. And he does the cinematography, which is beautiful. It really looks beautiful, really beautiful colours. Obviously, they're making some sort of statement against digital cameras or whatever, but it does look amazing. It sounds amazing. It's acted beautifully. I would say that the final chapter and the final quarter of the film, where one of the leads isn't there anymore, lets the air out of the tyres a lot. It's the least satisfying because the tension's wound up so brutally throughout the whole film. That final tiny bit of the film, I felt like the air had come out of the tyres and it was a bit more rudimentary. And the least satisfying and brilliant part of the film. But overall, fantastic stuff and really provocative. I'm surprised it hasn't got more stick from the positions it ultimately takes. And it's still a film that it did remind me a bit of was A Promising Young Woman, which was an amazing film. Yet, I guess it's probably closer to that than it is to anything else. But very provocative in its ideas and extremely expertly put together in the way that these out-of-sequence chapters completely change what's going on all the time. So it's a wild ride. Don't read up on it if you're going to watch it. And don't watch it if you're not prepared to be offended. There is quite a lot of violence, but I would say that the implied violence and sexual nature of what's happening would probably be more offensive as well. As it's kind of almost like a love story of sorts. If you could go back to something like Badlands or maybe even Natural Born Killers, it is kind of a love story of sorts. And ultimately, I thought this was really artistically, beautifully made and written, and above all else, acted. And like with the star of Smile 2, whose name's gone out, Emma, what's her name? I can't remember her name. But here, Willa Fitzgerald and Gallner are absolute standouts. Fantastic star-making performances from both of them in very difficult roles. I think the best acting they do is by keeping the audience unable to commit to one way or the other as to who their characters actually are. So another 8.5 out of 10 for Strange Darling. Another one of the best horror films in a year that's been full of them.